and as we know, smartphone connectivity has already transformed much of the way how students are accessing higher education in Africa. So we will see what kind of what kind of experiences you now have in the continent, and what do you think? Where are the bottlenecks, and where are the opportunities for the future? So everybody very much welcome, and I give over to Kaisa again. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Lisa. And as part of our project, I have authored a policy note that actually was published this week. It hasn't been launched yet, but I'm sharing it here as a soft launch with you. It's called Resources, Relevance and Impacts, and it talks about the key challenges for universities in Africa. And it forms part of kind of a larger, I will share the link to it in an email after we meet today. I think it shares kind of an idea of a larger context, just like Lisa was talking about. Universities are interconnected in the whole world, but we also see challenges being the same all over the world, but also peculiar to the African continent. And I was part of a webinar the other day organized by the International Association of Universities, the IAU. And there's a professor there from Ethiopia, Professor Tamrat, and he was talking about the previous normal and the new normal. So I borrowed a little bit from him and I added a few points. But I think just before we launch into the discussion, it's kind of important to contextualize a little bit. The previous normal for the continent was growing economies for most countries, some with the highest growth in the world. We could see kind of a predicted growth. We had a growing young population as well, which meant that economies were expanding. Universities are having a key role in this development, but of course access is highly unequal. Even when universities admit more students, the share of poor students is still relatively small from poor households, and it's more the elites that have access to higher education. Digitalization was budding, but also had huge barriers, such as low bandwidth, high costs, and of course power irregularities. Our societies were interconnected, but there was also huge dependency on foreign solutions. Now we're into a new normal. Economies all over the world are contracting, but there's huge uncertainty. We don't know when this crisis is ending. We don't know exactly how it will affect us, but we can guess that it will affect the people who are already struggling more than the others. We're now focused on protecting lives and livelihoods. Universities have closed all over the world. What did I have my numbers on that? I think it was it 9.8 million students on the continent that are currently not going to university as they usually were before. So we have been thrown into online learning and working from home. Many countries are experiencing lockdowns and or slow reopenings. And in the seminar with Professor Tamrat, he was talking about the silver lining, that where the dependency was on foreign solutions before, you can already see that now you're on your own. So you have to find local solutions and homegrown solutions. And that means he was suggesting a kind of a new approach, a new mindset. So that was just a little bit of context to this conversation. And today we're focusing on access and digitalization. And I think with that, as planned, we're launching into the presentations a little bit early. Desire, can I call on you? Are you ready to share with us your presentation? COVID-19 lockdown, can South African universities guarantee quality e-learning for students with disabilities? The floor is yours, if you want to unmute yourself.
Yes, I'm ready.
Okay, so you have 10 minutes, and I've asked Camilla to be our timekeeper. So she will let you know when you have 3 minutes left, and then when you have 1 minute left, and then we ask that you wrap up.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you too. And those of you who feel more comfortable turning off your camera, you can do so.
Hi everyone, my name is Desire Chiwandire. I just finished my PhD at Rhodes University, focusing on the inclusion of students with. So the title for my presentation is COVID-19 Lockdown. Can South African universities guarantee quality e-learning for students with disabilities? So basically, I was mainly interested on the issue of how, Kajsa has already provided the historical background, on how universities internationally have been forced to switch to e-learning, for all students, including students with disabilities. So I won't provide much historical background on that. South Africa is one of the universities which has also resorted to e-learning, and this is a new phenomenon, especially in South Africa and most African universities, to having to focus to adopt e-learning. They've mainly been contact universities. So if you look in the South African context, when it comes to the inclusion of students with disabilities, this is a group of students who have mainly been excluded when it comes to educational opportunities. Why? Because more emphasis has mainly been focused on their non-disabled peers. If there's issues of curriculum, it's always curriculum from the perspective of non-disabled students. So I think it's important for me to begin by defining the concept of inclusive education. So the dominant definition of inclusive education is supporting learners with disabilities so that they are able to be involved with their non-disabled peers to the maximum extent possible. So mainly this is a concept which emphasizes the need for students with disabilities to be supported, on the same level with their non-disabled peers, mainly in what is often referred to as the regular classroom setting. So very often it involves adapting the curriculum in order to ensure that, students with disabilities are equally supported. So when we talk about inclusive education, mainly, there's what I refer to as 5 pillars of inclusive education, So if an educational institution can meet these five criteria, then it shows that, that particular educational institution, could be considered as a best practices in terms of supporting students with disabilities. So very often funding is one of the most important aspects of inclusive education. And in South Africa, we've got what is often referred to as NSFAS bursaries, which provides funding for students with disabilities to access higher education, and also provide funding for assistive devices, any form of support which can enable students to succeed. The other supporting mechanism is the provision of reasonable accommodations, which varies depending on the student's disability. Let's say for students with specific learning disabilities, this could come in the form of extra time. And the other aspect is accessible built environment. There is a need for universities to build their buildings in line with the universal design principles so that they can be accessible, particularly for students with physical disabilities or mobility challenges, including those with other disabilities. This could be students with visual impairments. And there's also the provision of assistive devices. This mainly applies to students with visual impairments, And there's also the need to ensure that the curriculum is accessible to students with diverse disabilities. And this involves the role of lecturers. So for purposes of this presentation, I was mainly interested on the impact of COVID learning, through the lens of students with disabilities and support staff members. So I designed a questionnaire which had 5 questions, which I forwarded to students with disabilities at one institution. And I also forwarded it to support staff members. So in the questionnaire, what I was mainly interested in was to explore, which academic year the student is and the faculty, their disability and how the lockdown is affecting or has affected their learning, how their university is supporting them. This could include lecturers, tutors, or any relevant stakeholders within their universities. I was also mainly interested in potential challenges and opportunities of remote learning, that they are currently experiencing. So the questionnaire for disability unit staff members, in Africa, they are often referred to as disability unit staff members, but in other settings, they are referred to as disability coordinators. But yeah, so I was mainly interested on the measures that their unit are actually taking to support students with diverse disabilities, and I wanted to hear from their opinions that which category of students with disabilities are more likely to be affected by remote learning and why. I was also interested on the support, that the lecturers and tutors are providing during the lockdown, if they are doing any form of collaboration. And also I was interested in potential challenges and opportunities, that could be that emanate from the lockdown. So from the findings, so basically 5 students responded, and most of all of them had invisible disabilities, which ranged from depression, anxiety, epilepsy, and I used snowball sampling, so I contacted one student that I know with an invisible disability, who then referred me to her friends who also contributed to the study. So what I found, the dominant finding amongst students with disabilities, they felt that the university tends to use a one-size-fits-all approach, when it comes to the inclusion of students with disabilities. And this was more of two-sided, that, universities seems to focus mainly on non-disabled students at the cost of disabled students. Even within students with disabilities themselves, they felt that, students with disabilities are treated as a homogeneous group, so with more attention being paid on students with visible disabilities at the cost of students with invisible disabilities. So this is a dominant finding.
3 minutes remaining.
So the other challenge is that, there was the dominant understanding was that, for some students, there was a emphasis, especially from disability unit staff members, that, blind students and those with specific learning disabilities will be disproportionately affected in comparison to their peers. Especially because for blind students, most of them, they rely on assistive devices, they access in disability units. But now that they are learning from home remotely, they don't have access to those assistive devices. The same also applies to students with specific learning disabilities who rely on scribes. Because they are working from home, they will be disadvantaged from that particular access. And also there is an issue of socio-economic background. In South Africa, universities are divided in historically Black institutions and historically white institutions. So participants from historically Black institutions raised concerns about, how most of the students live in remote areas. So therefore, those students will be more affected when it comes to issues of connectivity. Other participants, disability unit staff members, spoke about how first-year students with disabilities are more likely to be affected because, this group is in its early phase, because this was the first semester. So this group is in its early phase of transitioning to university. So most of them are still learning about how to use assistive devices and all that. So they felt that, this group will be more affected. When it comes to opportunities, some students...
1 minute remaining.
Sorry?
1 minute remaining.
When it comes to some students, they felt that, when it comes to opportunities, there will be flexibility, because most universities are quite flexible on deadlines. Lecturers are not supposed to impose strict deadlines. They will do if it's conduct sessions. So they felt that, that's an opportunity that could be created by learning from remotely. And some participants felt that the delivery of hard copy material could help them, especially this participant has epilepsy, and she was speaking about how she can't stay on the computer for a long time. Other participants felt that, students with physical disabilities are less likely to be affected by learning remotely. Especially if they are learning in universities where there is, the built environment is inaccessible. When it comes to some feel that, this will create an opportunity for lecturers to move away from their comfort zone, especially because most lecturers in African universities, including South Africa, have mainly been used to teaching students through contact sessions. So this could encourage them to learn about how to use technology in order to support students from an e-learning standpoint. So in terms of conclusions and recommendations, there was emphasis that, lecturers need to learn about universal design for learning, so that they can be able to create and deliver the curriculum that could be accessible to students with diverse disabilities online. And lastly, there was emphasis on connectivity, to say even though the universities are providing laptops, to students with disabilities, it's important to emphasize the issue of connectivity, because without connectivity, some students will be excluded. So online learning could provide equitable opportunities, provided there is adequate opportunities to ensure that connectivity is enhanced. So that's all from my presentation. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Desire, for your presentation. If there are anyone who has questions, you can write your name in the chat. I had a question kind of relating to your last point about connectivity. For the students that you did survey, what was their connectivity situation? Did they have a fixed line at home, or did they get any help from the university, or they used their phones? What was the mode of connectivity, if you want?
So for most of the students, I think this year has to do with privilege, because most of all the students that I interviewed are from a historically white institution. So most of them seem to have their own laptops, and the institution is providing them with data. So most of them don't necessarily seem to have any challenges with connectivity. The only issue that they had was the issue of not having more opportunities to interact with their supervisors. And also remember, these are postgraduate students. They don't necessarily need to be on, they don't have many courses. They're just focusing on their postgraduate studies. Some of them are doing their masters. But it's a different aspect now to historically Black institutions, because in these institutions you find out that some students don't even have a laptop.
Yeah.
And they're still waiting for the university to provide them with one.
Yes, imagine to do online studies and online work, working from home without a laptop. That is a challenge. Thank you so much, Desire. I think if there are more questions, we have to push them to the discussion later on. And now we are moving on to Professor Stian Hagberg, and he will talk to us about partnership on a shoestring, how to foster sustainable research networks in Corona times and beyond. Stian, over to you.
Thank you very much, Kajsa. It's a great pleasure to be here. I've entitled my presentation Partnership on a Shoestring, and let me start by what I mean with that. I think that the partnership is the kind of term used a lot in terms of development cooperation, in terms of academic cooperation. But of course, partnership is also an implication and an expectation of having funding and institutional and muscles and resources in various ways. And what I want to talk about is how to make a partnership on a shoestring, with a low budget, moving on, working in that sense. And I take as my point of departure the research laboratory that we have recently founded between Burkina Faso, Mali, and Uppsala, Sweden. We call it Le Laboratoire d'Anthropologie Comparative Engagée et Transnationale. So a research lab for the comparative, engaged, and transnational anthropology. And this is built up of a group of researchers who have been working together. We have been working for years, for a very long time. And finally, we felt the need to set up a research lab that can be an umbrella for lots of our efforts. And we did so without a single dime. We didn't have any money involved in this because we have ongoing research projects, we have ongoing collaborations with specific individuals, but we felt that we need to have something that is beyond a specific program or a specific project and so forth. And we, in this research lab, if you set up a research lab without any specific funding, core funding attached to it, how do you do it? Well, you have to start with a shoestring. And the word for shoestring in French is also in English, by the way, lacet. Lacet, the acronym of the lab, is also to signal that we are working, whether we have money or not, we are working. It's not that we are against having funding, but we find that it's important that academic cooperation and collaboration must be put to the fore. One way of doing this, and this has started well before the Corona times, was to set up a virtual seminar. So we have a virtual seminar that we have launched between these three institutions in Burkina, Mali, and Uppsala. And we started as a virtual classroom. I mean, to have 3 classrooms connected through a video conference system. We did so, and this is to jump out of this research lab, but we also have done so since last year with our Mozambique collaboration between Eduardo Mondlane and Uppsala University, to have a ongoing research seminar, which is not spectacular, which is not fancy, but it's just the ordinary academic work that we do when we share papers, we read student papers, we are sharing viewpoints and so forth. Participants of these seminars have to read the papers in advance, and to do this we use either you can send out the papers, but often we use some of the platforms within Uppsala University called Studium, so we create a space there. The reason why I'm bringing up this is because I think that when we are, and yeah, I should add, now we are planning for Zoom seminars. So in 2 weeks' time, we will have 2 Zoom seminars, one with Eduardo Mondlane on democracy and public engagement in troubled times, in times of crisis. And then we will have another one on ethnographies of insecurity the following day. So the idea here is that instead of focusing on technology, ITC, and so on, we have to focus on pedagogy, what we can as lecturers, what research seminars, how to make it into a meaningful experience, not just into a second best option. So in that sense, I think that to echo what has already been said, I think that what we see in Corona times is that all inequalities that we already know and know well are getting more and more accentuated, because online education requires connection. And I think it's worth remembering James Ferguson's distinction in his book Expectations of Modernity, when he said that disconnection is not the absence of connection, but is being not connected any longer. So it's this feeling of being disconnected. And I think we have all experienced that when we sit in meetings and all of a sudden nobody can hear what you say, or you can't see the images or the PowerPoints and so forth. So in that sense, I think it's so important that we recognize this, and we also find what are the impacts for our own studies and our own research and research collaborations. And I would like really to emphasize, and this is my main point, that let's not focus on software, but focusing on, ITC software, but let's focus on pedagogical skills, research skills, and how to do it. A third example of doing a partnership on the shoestring, or at least handling this current time, is that I am giving currently a PhD course at Uppsala University, and one of the participants, Marcia, she will be talking afterwards. And in that PhD course, we have 2 Mozambican PhD students in Uppsala, 2 Mozambican PhD students in Maputo, and 1 Swedish student from Lund sitting in the US. So we have been able to do this kind of PhD course despite the Corona times. And I think that is a promising thing. That's something that we should really use as an experience later on. What we also do is that we record all the lectures in order to, if there is this connection, we can also it could be possible for the person to look at the lecture afterwards. This is not to be spread. It's just me standing where I stand now, not very welcome. And I haven't been to the hairdresser for a long time, so I don't want to be shared. It's not my best side, but I think it's a very kind of functional way of approaching issues. I have two more points, and then I will stop. One way that Corona has also impacted my work is that I have been contacted by University Nazi Boni, which is the University of Bobo Dioulasso in Burkina Faso.
3 minutes.
Yeah, and they have Professor Patrice Toué contacted me, and they are now going to launch a study of studying the barrier measures taken by the Burkinabe government, and how citizens, various categories of citizens, are experiencing all these restrictions on political and social and civic liberties that are taking place in the time of Corona. And I think that is a very innovative way of doing, and gladly they got funding for this, and I will play the role of being a kind of advisor in terms of methodology, because I think it's so important to also to look at what is going on. As for social scientists, we need to study this in one way or another. My last point, I was going to host a big conference on insecurity, beyond the insecurity and crisis in West Africa, here in Uppsala in June this year. And of course, this was extremely frustrating, seeing that it was not going to take place. But we wanted to look into insecurity in terms of military, in terms of citizens' insecurity, violence, political turmoil, and so on. I think that a great impact of the corona situation will be that we will organize a roundtable on the corona pandemic in one way or another. So in that sense, I think it will be postponed. We will do it later, but we will also try to find ways of dealing with it. And I think that the lesson we need to, the takeaway that I would like to stress is that the world is as it used to be. It's just very different times we are living in. And that's why we should not start reassessing everything. We have to look
1 minute.
what are the pedagogical skills that we need to develop? What are the research networks that we need to work for? When we know that funding is insecure, when we know that we might have problems. So that's why we have to think innovatively about how to develop partnerships on a shoestring. Thank you very much.
We're done there, Sim. Thank you very much for your inspiring presentation. Please write your name in the chat box if you have a question for Sten. I was thinking about when you do these seminars on a shoestring, do you feel like, from your experience, maybe also from the PhD course you're talking about, do you need to meet in person before for this to work, or you can kind of start online? Is that possible? So the question is kind of, do we need the personal meetings? We can replace them with Zoom and online technology, or yes,
I think that we would like to meet. I would like to meet all of them. I would like to interact normally with people. But if that's not possible, I think that this opens up for an opportunity in the sense that we can also have chatting time. So what we often do is that I open up the session at 2 o'clock as I open my ordinary classroom, and then students and we can chat. And I think that the Mozambican contingent, they are chatting about what's going on at home and the news from the country and so on. And then at 15 minutes past, which is the academic quarter in Uppsala, then we start. And then we also, so we try to encourage this kind of social interaction and so on. I must say, and I think this is maybe an answer to your question, we don't record the seminar part of the session, because I don't think that we should making Big Brother looking at us every time. But I mean, as lecturers, you can give the lecture, you can give the presentation, but the discussion, you have to feel free. You have to, you have to feel that you can be less thought through in the seminar setting. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that reminds me of that time we're going to have an online meeting for the conference you mentioned that now was cancelled. And for some reason, I think a technical issue, you didn't show up on time. So some of us were there waiting for you, and it was a lovely discussion before you showed up. Yeah. It was very relaxed. Yeah. Henning made a comment in the chat room. I don't know if he wants to make it in person as well before we move on to Mireille. Or was this issue about personal meetings?
Yeah. No, but I don't think that this is a reason for reconsidering having physical meetings, of course. But I do think that we should think, reflect also on our work. And for me, to give a kind of PhD course where access is possible for people across the world is quite interesting, because it could be much more specialized than if I should count on a student population in Uppsala. So I think that we have issues there that we should take as an interesting way to develop our pedagogical skills.
I think that's a very good point, that there are like upsides to the virtual meetings too, that you can have a larger reach, so to say, and a more specialized discussion. With that, I think I want to hand over to Mireille. She is talking to us about the COVID-19 pandemic and adaptation of higher educational digital technologies in Cameroon, where she is doing research and teaching. Mireille, welcome.
Yes, welcome. Hello, everyone. Let me switch to my PowerPoint. Okay. So, hello everyone, I'm Mireille Mangai-Dimos, lecturer at the Department of International Politics at the International Relations Institute of the University of Yaoundé 2 in Cameroon, and I'm happy to be with you today to share exploratory results on what I've called COVID-19, I've entitled COVID-19 pandemic and adaptation of higher education in Cameroon to digital technologies. So the outline of this presentation is based on, I can say, 3 main points. The first point will be to talk about, to locate higher education in Cameroon as one of the major entrepreneurs of the National Strategic Plan for Digitalization that have been published and adopted in 2016 for a realization in 2020. And then in the second part of my presentation, I will talk about the link between that national program, that is the e-national higher education program and e-learning Cameroon Public University in normal situation. Before now coming to the last point on the COVID-19 pandemic and impacts regarding the rapid policy changes we have been observing for now, and digitalization of courses and programs at the University of Yaoundé 2 and Eric particularly. These are the contexts best known. And I'll conclude my presentation with the challenges and way forward based on personal experience I've had during this particular context. So regarding higher education in Cameroon and the politics of digitalization, it is mentioned in the National Strategy Plan for Cameroon Digitalization that was published in 2016 for realization in 2020 on the page 59 to 61 as one of the major actors of this of the digitalization process in Cameroon. And the objective of such plan is to ensure the availability of quality and quantity of human skills to meet the needs of digital economy and design key preoccupation related to e-governance in the domain of education in Cameroon. So the opportunity regarding our roundtable today, I think this is the opportunity to assess the role of that particular ministry through public actions carried out by university in the domain of e-learning, e-education, and digitalization and research. So, coming to the first point, e-national higher education program and e-learning public university in Cameroon. First of all, let's say this is the major policy reference of ICT development in higher education, which is called to respond to 7 axes. I can come back to it later if it's necessary. And this national higher education, this program has particularly contributed since 2016 to putting pressure on university on designing that have to design and modernize their website, the first thing, and other virtual platform for more societal visibility, inclusion, and democratization of information as well as for more transparent administrative practices. I explain. Since the program has been put in place, we have observed every 2 years a kind of evaluation that is guided both by CAMES, which is a regional institution of higher education in sub-Saharan Africa, and the ministry itself. The second point is also that it resulted for 3 years now in the student equipment with free laptops and online registration facilities. Regarding the free laptops, these are mobile computers that are offered to every registered student at public university in Cameroon. And another point is that I consider this as an absolute opportunity to opening up to globalization and the broadening of public university visibility. So the question that came into mind regarding the COVID-19 pandemic were about 3, but I will try to answer to them according to my own experience. The first is, does this apply to all public university and higher education program in Cameroon? How do Cameroon public university embrace e-learning and digitalization in the context of COVID-19 pandemic? And to what may be considered in the COVID-19 pandemic context as the new normal? How do public university in Cameroon to adapt to digital technologies? So, to answer to those preliminary questions and exploratory research, we have attempted to examine key points. One key point: actions carried out by public university administration as well as lecturers and student reaction in relation to this. Consider that major policy reference we mentioned earlier. And after our preliminary inquiries, what we've realized is that there have been rapid policy changes to in a situation where there was like, okay, not real engagement regarding the digital technologies. There have been rapid policy changes, prompt adaptation, but also reluctance or absence. Rapid development of public measures. This has been observed through the diverse public meetings organized to try to find out solutions to the context. There has also been design of e-learning platform within university website and for registered students. But while some of them are really functional from a direct internet access, others are not yet functional, but they are visible on the university website, what is already quite good. The third point is the mobilization.
Remaining.
Yes, the third point is the mobilization of virtual platforms such as radio for teaching purpose for level 1 and 2 students, and intense use of WhatsApp group to share courses and other educative digital contents. Another point is the organization of video conference for e-defense. However, in schools such as ERIC, the above initiative are still limited to private master program, which most of them are engaged in international cooperation with other university partners. In this particular case, we also observed that while some lecturers and teachers seem already familiar to professional discussion with their students using digital platform, others seem in a total process of adaptation. Some categories don't use to the utilization of digital technology to share professional contents of all kinds, find it difficult to adapt themselves to digital approach to teaching and group interaction within a fixed hour period. But what has been surprising is definitely the capacity of all the categories to comply with the situation and overcome personal and societal challenge. Regarding the absence as a result, in line with the absence, we have noticed that other public programs offered by the school here in ERIC have been totally interrupted. Planning a resume only in June 1st, 2020 as announced by the government. Regarding the strengths and challenges, the last point, in public universities such as the University of Yaoundé 2, students from level 3 to 5 are happy with the initiative for the low cost in terms of access, constraint. I'll come back to it maybe through question, constraint and online availability of completed courses program. For my own online experience, teaching online experience using WhatsApp group in a specific program at the I found the process more demanding. Any written material should be very precise. Imagination works much more. I had to learn to use my phone devices, get to platform on time, and keep students alert for at least 4 hours. So, but beyond this, we have noticed problem of access, some lecturers to digital technology, and the inability to share written courses within the interval 20 hours. So maybe I can come back to way forward later. But I think COVID-19 pandemic has been a great opportunity to explore free online platform, digitalize, think about digitalizing library contents and acquire, learn, and try to learn to use library databases. And Regarding the time constraint, I think I can end here and come back to discussion later. Thank you very much for your kind attention.
Thank you very much, Mireille. I think it's great work that you've been able to start your research on actually how the COVID crisis is affecting the implementation of plans already there. Very positive that they have been fast forwarded. But you mentioned also problems of access, especially for your students. We spoke before today, and you're running an entire course on WhatsApp. Are all your students able to join that course, for instance? What are some of the, you can talk a little bit more on problems of access. And then Michael has a question as well. Yeah.
Yes, I can say if WhatsApp was the solution in that particular case, because this was the cheaper digital technologies available to students, and has a virtual platform. It was also the best alternative for the school that haven't got a more modernized platform, virtual platform. And according to the experience I had, the problem of access, what is interesting here is that the problem of access was not only linked to internet, it was also linked to energy provision, electricity, as there have been many shortage, cutting lights, things like that have been prevented some students to be present at times and attend the course normally. Even me, I've been victim of that electricity shortage. So I think what is interesting here is maybe regarding the digital technologies, it's close relationship with the use of energy, electricity, energy, which is also a challenge here in Africa, in Cameroon, in a particular environment. That's why I really focus on the problem of access, and I think this can be the contribution to the debate. Think about linking the both.
Excellent, thank you. Michael had a question.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Okay, thank you so much for this wonderful presentation. When I was going through your slide, I was happy to note that since 2016, Cameroon have been kind of getting prepared for such a pandemic. And but I want to ask a question from the universities. Have the universities done enough to digitalize the system? Like, can the students get access to the academic result transcript through the university website? Also, the university, do they have like functioning Wi-Fi or Wi-Fi for the students? Because it's definitely have to start from the universities if they want to go digital. And secondly, the use of radio, like you said, level 3 to 4, they make use of radio.
1 to 2, yes.
Considering the fact that radio broadcast is limited to the view of only the presenter, do you think like is a very good means of lecturing the students? So these are my questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Michael, for your questions. And regarding the experience from universities, access to transcript via online digital platform, and it all depends. As I said, it all depends. There are some universities that have been able to adapt quickly because they on their website and platform, this kind of services already available online. For example, I can mention the University of Buea, the University of Buea and the University of Douala, whom I could realize yesterday running the website that they are really advanced. And from the university, in the University of Buea, for example, you don't need to move to the university to apply for a transcript. So this all depends. It's really relative. At the University of Yaoundé too, that may seem more equipped is during the COVID pandemic context that they have been able to adapt their platform, but they did it so quickly, quicker than other universities such as Ngaoundéré or Marwa. And now coming to online platform teaching or online teaching, the University of Marwa has been able to adapt quicker than ERIC, that seems more funded and more equipped than the University of Marwa. So I think it's all depends, and there is a question of leadership also, I think, regarding the process of adaptation here. And the question about the radio courses on radio, these are deserved to level 1 and 2 students, university. And why radio course? First of all, taking a look at the I don't know how you call effective numbers of students. There are thousands at university. This is a point I needed to mention. There are thousands, almost 2,000, 2005 in level 1 and 2. So it was difficult, according to exchanges I had with administrative staff, is that it's difficult to interact in using a platform to interact with 2,000 students at once, managing questions on virtual platforms. So they just prefer a presenter, a lecturer to present the course, and maybe get 2 or 3 questions from the public, intervening directly through the radio. And regarding also the case of WhatsApp groups, we observe that these are the kind of platform used only in small programs of 40 to 45 students, where it's more easier, though it takes like 4 hours, it's more easier for one side or the other side, lecturers and students, to interact and have more close discussions. So it all depends. And I think that from that particular point of view, there is a question of leadership. Who is managing? What's the relationship of the manager or main actor to the technologies themselves? It's very, very important.
Thank you very much, Mireille, and also for shedding light on what is happening right now. That's very current research we get to take part of there. At this point, I wanted to hand over to Ms. Ndomo Dlamini of the Association of African Universities. Ndomo, I think you have your video off, if it's possible to turn it on so we can see you. Yes, there you are. So Ndomo, she is the Director of ICT Services and Knowledge Management at the AAU, and therefore has a very particular vantage point to speak both from her organizational experience, but maybe also on behalf of her members, the universities in Africa. So Ndomo, I give you 10 minutes.
Okay, thank you very much, Kaisa. Thank you to the speakers that have spoken ahead of me. And as a discussant, I will comment concerning inclusivity. I think inclusivity is something that we have learned or has been emphasized through COVID-19. The fact that there are diverse groups of students and people that need to be taken into consideration. And the biggest challenge, as has been said, is the broad infrastructure issues that really lead to challenges with equity and access. And when we look at some of these broad infrastructure issues, we need to remember that we must look at them at a campus level. If the campus infrastructure is weak, then that campus infrastructure cannot support students and faculty remotely. And also there's national to reach the rural areas during COVID-19 challenges.
Could you turn off your video to make the sound more stable?
Okay,
Thanks.
let me do that. Let me do that. Sorry about that.
No problem.
Yeah. Let me stop my share. Okay. Thank you.
And now you can share the PowerPoint again.
Yes, yeah.
You can see it.
Yeah. So the infrastructure issues need to be looked at a campus level, at a national level, and also regional infrastructure level. And these feed into each other. At a national level, we need our governments to be really looking at not just the urban areas in terms of connectivity. For universities in Africa, we have what is called National Research and Education Networks. The challenge is that they are not at the same level in terms of maturity. But these institutions are the ones that are supposed to act as internet providers for educational and research institutions. So what we've seen during COVID-19 is that there have been negotiations that universities have been making with telecommunications companies to be able to address issues of connectivity for their students. The presentation on partnerships on a shoestring was very good, especially in relation to that funding has been prioritized to address health and other more urgent needs. And it seems like education issues will not be priority for some time until we fixed this COVID. So as the Association of African Universities, we have focused our partnership strategy on advocacy and facilitation and providing expert advice to universities and helping them to verify providers, negotiating on their behalf, speaking to some of the suppliers for consortium deals that the universities could access. And we've also been doing a lot of capacity building through webinars. We are also learning that mother is the necessity of innovations. I think for a long time we've been trying to push universities to progress the digitization of their teaching, learning, and research, and we thought they were not moving fast enough. We also thought maybe it's a leadership issue. We needed more charismatic leaders to be able to move this agenda. But COVID has taught us that when there's a need, people or institutions are likely to listen. But we are seeing our universities in Africa not so prepared, especially in terms of handling emergency responses. We ran a survey with the universities, and they told us that the biggest challenge was responding fast enough so that they don't lose time. And we saw, however, that they handled international students very well. And we also learned that some universities said they would be teaching fully. The majority said they would be teaching partially, and there was quite a big number which said we've closed and we are not teaching. The tools that universities are using, as the last presenter said, they are using email, they are using WhatsApp, they are using Google Classrooms, they are using Zoom. And in terms of content, even though there's content out there from edX, Coursera, and the like, our universities are not yet using that. So we are trying to find a way to get them to look at that content and select what could be useful for them. But we know, of course, that academics sometimes resist using content that has been developed by other people. Learning management systems are there. The challenge with them is that the universities had not institutionalized them. So they are having to revisit their institutional policies, which says the use of the learning management system is compulsory, and most of them are using Moodle. We also see...
remaining.
Yeah, thank you. We also see a great need, or rather our universities have been supporting their communities, developing or manufacturing face masks or manufacturing hand sanitizers. In terms of high-level research to find a cure, we find that there are a few universities involved. Most of them are delegating their staff to participate in national initiatives. So in conclusion, I think we agree that infrastructure is a big issue. Institutionalization of online education is important. Even when COVID goes, we need to have blended approaches to teaching and learning. We think our universities should consider sharing infrastructure on the cloud in order to reduce costs so that they don't all do their own small things. Training, I think, is very important, and our curricula has been challenged. It must be skills focused. The way that we examine must be different. We must have different ways of assessing whether learning has happened. And then offline learning solutions are also becoming very important. Radio, TV, podcasts, sending materials to students that have no connectivity. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ndumo, for kind of summarizing this conversation. I don't see that anyone has a direct question to you. Maybe your role was more of a discussant. And I think we'll come back to some of these issues in our discussion a bit later. Now we're gonna move to break, and we'll return 10 past the hour. In Sweden it's 12:10. And I'll stay on here if anyone wants to chat, but I encourage all of you to stretch and do what you need to do to be refreshed back here 10 past the hour. So see you soon.